Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth and final day of the IEEE We ILC. I'm here to introduce Sandra Rivera. She is the EVP and Chief People Officer at Intel. Sandra started her career as an electrical engineer. She has a bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania State University and has been at Intel since 2000 as the marketing director after they acquired her previous employer, Dialogic. She leads Intel's human resource organization and is responsible for driving greater business results through a culture that embraces diversity and inclusion, as well as being responsible for the company's policies and programs related to human resources worldwide. She also sits on the Equinix Board of Directors, is a member of Berkeley's Engineering Advisory Board, and is part of Intel's Hispanic Leadership Council. So thank you, Sandra, for joining us at the We ILC, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Heather, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever in the world you're videoing in from. It is truly my pleasure to be here with all of you to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that is how we keep our women in the workforce, how we not just survive, but thrive during this pandemic and post-pandemic world, and in particular, of course, our technical women. You know, COVID-19 was almost specifically designed to torpedo women's careers. If we look at the disproportionate amount of work that women typically have in terms of caregiving responsibilities in the home. And when everything shut down last year, daycares and schools and all of the additional burdens, it just created all of this stress for all of us that have those responsibilities. In addition to that, we know that many of the service sectors where women of color work, many women of color in retail and hospitality, in the restaurant and food industry, that industry or that set of industries have been even more disproportionately impacted, and then women of color subsequently have been disproportionately impacted as well. And a recent study has shown that employment for women may not recover until 2024 post this pandemic, which is a full 2 years after men are expected to recover employment to pre-pandemic levels. So I am going to share with you some data over the next few minutes, some very discouraging data, but I will say that nothing gives me more hope than being with a room full of women engineers, knowing that there isn't really any problem we can't solve working together. So I'll start off with a little bit about myself and my background. You know, from the very beginning, I am the daughter of Colombian immigrants. My parents came to the US with $100 in their pocket, 100 words of English in their vocabulary, and a very big dream for their young family to have a better life in the US. Education was always stressed in our household. I was a good student. I liked math and science. I went to Penn State, as Heather shared. And I didn't start out in engineering. I thought I was going to be a doctor, but my academic advisor told me that I could get a good paying job in engineering, which I didn't even know what that was after only 4 years. And given that I was really struggling to figure out how I was going to pay for all that schooling in medical school, I said, yeah, that sounds like a great option for me. So I went that path, really making a very practical decision of what I thought would allow me to have a good life to provide for myself and my family. I started out my career at a large company, Westinghouse Electric. Many of you are way too young to remember Westinghouse, but it was a large company. And I started in a rotational engineering program for a couple of years. But my last assignment was in product management, and I realized how much I enjoyed solving customer problems with our products. And I made the decision after a few years to leave that company and go into a technical sales career. And over the subsequent 15 years, having joined a startup through an IPO, having left and done my own startup, sold that, and then ultimately starting another business, a consulting practice. I spent those 15 years in the communications industry, really as an entrepreneur, being part of startups or having my own startups, but through a series of circuitous events, I ended up at Intel. And this game board that you see here is a great representation of just the kinds of twists and turns that my career, probably many of your careers, will typically take, right? We sometimes think that careers are kind of up and to the right, but the fact is that there's typically a lot of decisions that get made along the way. Some some that you foresee, some opportunities that you don't, having a set of successes and disappointments perhaps along the way. And my career was no different. When I joined Intel, I joined as part of their communications and networking business, and I spent 10 years really in the trenches, helping to build out that business, being part of the team that built that business. But Intel, for any of you that may be familiar, is a West Coast-based company, and I was based on the East Coast. And it seems a little odd now, but back then, in order for progression to take place, you had to decide to move to the West Coast, either headquarters or some of the large sites based on the West Coast. And because I got married, my husband and I have been together 30 years, we have 4 children. Between the children, my husband's business in Manhattan, and all of the support infrastructure with our family, friends, neighbors that we counted on, I just could not make the decision to move and leave all that behind. I could not actually do my work if I didn't have my support infrastructure. But as a result, and this is something that I do share, I was passed over for promotions for 10 years. I was always a high performer, did a great job, but because I wouldn't move, I chose not to move. I was always passed over. And while it was quite disappointing and frustrating to me, I will say that I just decided, you know what, I'm going to focus on my internal networks, my external networks, my ability to influence through others, my ability to collaborate and just practice creative problem solving. And through all of the time, the sweat equity, perhaps, that I invested in really learning the networking business, creating value for Intel, I was offered the opportunity to lead that organization in 2015, and it's been, it was a wonderful ride. The networking business for Intel is an over $5 billion, very profitable business now. But it is just an example of where I was not really happy to not be promoted and advancing, but I just made the decision that I was going to do the very best job and learn a lot laterally, even if I wasn't able to progress. And here again, it's those choices that we make throughout our career, some advancements, some setbacks, some way that you feel good about the promotions and the growth and scope and opportunity, and then some of the disappointments. And perhaps just one last point before we move is that 2 years ago, our then CEO asked me to pivot, to make a pivot as Intel was going through a business transformation. He and I saw that our greatest asset, of course, is our people. And in order to accelerate our business transformation, we really needed to evolve our culture and tap into our greatest asset, which is our people. And so I took on this role, made the hard pivot, as you would say, and I've been the chief people officer for Intel these last couple of years, and have learned a tremendous amount. Not anything I planned to ever be doing, but certainly operating in an enterprise level, working directly for the CEO, has been an unexpected twist and turn, but one full of a lot of joy and learning, and hopefully a positive impact. So let me turn now to share some data on these trends that we're seeing in the post-pandemic or I guess in pandemic and then post-pandemic workforce, and how we can reverse some of the very disappointing trends. So Well, just taking a look at women in STEM, women getting degrees in engineering and computer science, we've seen that over the past 20 years, that actually the number of women getting engineering degrees is quite flat. It has varied on any given year between 18 to 21%. And you can see here that it really isn't increasing. In computer science, actually, it's declined from 28% to now 19% during that same horizon. And when you look at the senior leadership roles, we see that only 10% of the women in leadership roles in technology or women are in leadership roles in the tech industry. When you look at our Black, Latina, Native American women in computer science, the data is even worse. We've gone from 6% of the population to only 4% over the past 10 years. So those are even more discouraging numbers. And at this pace, women of color will not double in terms of being part of the tech workforce until 2052, which is just completely unacceptable. And if you look at, just when women do enter the workforce, that the trends are actually not any better. So what you see is that women are leaving the tech workforce at higher rates than men and at higher rates than non-technical, non-STEM jobs. A recent study done has shown that after about 12 years, half of the women, 50% of the women are leaving STEM jobs compared to women leaving only 20% of non-STEM jobs. If you look at just how devastating this pandemic has been, 1.1 million women between the ages of 25 and 54 have actually left the workforce between February of last year and March of this year. And that compares to 830,000 men that have left the workforce. So again, women have been disproportionately impacted. And a recent census that was done shows that 1 in 3 women between the ages of 25 and 44 indicate that the reason for them to exit the workforce is childcare. And so they cite childcare and home responsibilities as one of the major reasons that they're leaving the workforce. And that compares to only 12% of men. And in families where you have dual career parents, you hear, or we've heard from the women saying that, hey, 40% of them are spending 3 or more hours a day on childcare, elder care, home care responsibilities versus only 27%. So all of this is quite damning data, but we can do something about it. And I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes talking about what we can do at the corporate, the industry, and the personal level to turn these trends around. So companies like Intel, large corporations, have a special role, an important role to play in reversing these trends. And at Intel, a company that is mostly, we're 100 and roughly 20,000 employees, 2/3 are technical, engineers. And most of everything we do is data driven. So we believe that you measure what matters, and what gets measured gets done. And we had spent 10 years really looking at this problem, this challenge, this opportunity to bring more women into the tech workforce from 2005 to 2015, but realized that we had barely moved the needle in that time. Very incremental, very painstaking, slow progress. So in 2015, our CEO declared to the world, to the industry at CES, he was giving the keynote, that we would achieve parity in our US workforce for women and underrepresented minorities by the end of the decade. And we set out a very aggressive and deliberate plan to achieve our goals, where everyone was measured on their attainment, not just attracting, but growing, investing in, and progressing the talent. And as a result, we actually achieved our goals 2 years early. So we had achieved our parity goal in the US in 2018. And then in 2019, we achieved global pay equity for women and men, something that we're quite proud of. And last year, we actually set out our next set of goals, our RISE 2030 goals, which are anchored in doubling the number of women and underrepresented minorities in senior leadership roles, and growing our workforce within Intel from 25% to 40% women in tech roles. We also have along the way made a lot of investments in partnering with industry leaders. Through our Intel Foundation, we established a Million Girl Moonshot to help girls really pursue STEM careers, STEM pathways in high school and then subsequently in college. And we've done that in partnership with other foundations, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the STEM Next Project, just working together to try to invest in the pipeline. Secondly, we really always believe that accountability that is driven through reinforcing systems, how you hire, how you promote, how you evaluate, how you nurture, how you invest in your talent, is the only way to have sustainable change. It cannot be based on just me as I think this is the right thing to do. What is in the system, and particularly in the companies that are so large and complex, to reinforce the things that we value. And so we have built diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of the systems that we have, and including how we're paid. So there are goals for the entire company. It's not just certain leaders to achieve our representation goals and to really make our progress, the progress we need each and every year to achieve our ambitious RISE 2030 goals. We also believe that we believe in progress over perfection, that we have to listen, we have to learn, we have to iterate on many of the programs and the systems and the support infrastructure that we have, really co-designing and co-developing that with our employees. And that has allowed us to iterate, right? To if we're doing something that's working well, double down. If we're doing something not working so well, pivot away. And nowhere was this better demonstrated than during the COVID-19 pandemic when it hit, and all of the benefits and support infrastructure that we put in place throughout, again, and continuing throughout last year and this year, and really anchoring on the idea of flexibility and options and support. So we've provided all types of support and funding for childcare and elder care, additional paid time off, job share opportunities, part-time with benefit opportunities, tutoring and resource support for the children of our parents, and just trying to find every way possible to keep our women engaged and not just surviving, but really growing and thriving throughout this pandemic. And when all else fails, we've also provided up to 1 year of unpaid job protected leave. If our women, our parents, any of our employees are really finding it very difficult to navigate throughout the pandemic, we've even provided that. And we've also provided a number of mental health benefits, because certainly this pandemic has taken quite a toll on not just our physical, but also our mental health. So just listening, learning, iterating on the benefits that we think will help our parents and our women the most. And then finally, just investing in that pipeline. A lot of the work that Intel has done has been around creating a greater level of inclusivity in the communities within which we operate, investing in digital readiness of students, all the way down to the middle school level. It's one of the things that we've done. And then up through, of course, post high school, we have an initiative that we launched last year, our AI for Youth program, to teach AI skills to a community, in partnership with community colleges, so that we can again ready that next generation of talent to enter the workforce with the skills needed to grow. So while we're very proud of what we've done at Intel, we also know that there's no one company that can do all of this work alone. And so we do really believe that it takes us working at the industry level to drive forward on sustainable, lasting change. So So from an industry perspective, in fact, just yesterday, we announced a new coalition, the Alliance for Global Inclusion, together with other tech and tech adjacent companies. And we're very proud to be part of that effort where we're trying to work together as an industry to establish a consistent set of metrics and goals that we will all transparently report. There's a lot of accountability in reporting publicly, both to your employees, but as well as externally, and working with boards of directors and CEOs to double the leadership representation in certainly each of our organizations, but in the tech industry at large. We also are focused on inclusive language, using more inclusive language and getting rid of terms like master slave and whitelist and blacklist and some of that very offensive non-inclusive language. And it's just another part of the commitment that we've made working together. In addition to that, we are partnered on how we mitigate bias in our products, and in particular in the field of AI, and how we, again, root out some of that bias in the AI algorithms that we know is a dangerous tool. I mean, AI is a wonderful technology, but it needs to be used to do good in the world, and the algorithm development is critical to having a positive and not a negative outcome. And then, of course, this idea of STEM readiness in underserved communities and in the high school, in the community colleges, in the higher education, but all the way down to the middle school as well. So working together, we're very excited about this coalition, this alliance, and I would invite all of you that are in companies large and small to prod perhaps your leaders to look at this as an opportunity to join an important industry-wide effort. So let me turn now to the importance of personal actions. So there is such an impact that each of us can make every single day for ourselves and our families and our work teams, but also for other women, our colleagues and coworkers in the organization. And I'll start with just this idea of having a learning and growth mindset. When I look back on my career, that game board, that twists and turns, the kind of circular loop, sometimes feeling like you're not really progressing, I just decided that I was going to learn how to create value for the organization and for my customers, and learn everything possible, working in the trenches, rolling up my sleeves, and really just looking at that as a learning opportunity. And I remember, in my career that, sometimes I work for great managers, sometimes I work for not so great managers. And even then thinking, gosh, if I could get stuff done working for a not so great manager, imagine what I'll be able to do when I have a great leader that I'm working for. Secondly, this idea of advocating for yourself. This is not something that women are typically very comfortable doing, but you really do have to be clear about your intentions, your desires, your skills, your accomplishments, and take control of your career. I think that one of the best pieces of advice I got from a wonderful woman outside of Intel. When we were talking about how awkward it is for women to talk about their accomplishments, she said, hey, for me, the thing that works is just instead of saying this is what I've done is, well, what people would say about me is, I'm a hard worker. You can count on me. I'm smart. I'm dependable. Whatever that list is. So whatever those tools are, you have to know your value. You have to learn to advocate for yourself. You have to raise your hand to take on that additional challenge, task, opportunity, and really learn to be your own best champion. Third, when we look at the importance of mentors, coaches, and sponsors, I cannot underscore this enough. The idea that you build out a board of advisors, a board of directors for yourself. I have so many wonderful men and women that that I go to on difficult decisions and trade-offs and bounce ideas off of them. They kind of hold up the mirror to me as well sometimes and oftentimes. And it's just very helpful. People that I know and trust to tell me the brutal truth because I know that they have my best interests in hand. And so it is really important. You don't need 100 of them. You may not even need 10 of them, but you need a handful that you can really count on. And similarly, how do you then pay it forward? One of the things that I say to women all the time is that most, not all, but most of the important decisions about your career are going to be made when you're not in the room. And who is going to speak for you? And who are you speaking for when you're in a position of power or responsibility or authority to highlight someone's ability to take on that next task, to be considered for that role? Pay it forward. It's such a wonderful feeling to know that you positively impact lives of other women and men, and that you've done something good in terms of your legacy. And then finally, this idea of building community. One of the things that I have found in my many years of working is that we often feel very alone or isolated. We think we're the only ones that have ever experienced this problem. We think we're the only ones that are feeling discouraged or disappointed or overlooked or undervalued. And talking through that in that sense of community with others really makes you realize that you're not alone, and that there are probably strategies and techniques and tools that you can use, that you can share, that will help you overcome that feeling of loneliness and isolation. And there's just strength in numbers. There's just strength in community. So to close, I've shared with you what I believe will take all of us working hard together at the corporate level, at the industry level, and at the personal level to advocate and support women staying in the workforce, and particularly staying in the technical fields. And careers are like this game board, right? It's a journey of twists and turns, and it's what you make of it. Everything is a choice. Everything is a trade-off. Everything is an active, deliberate decision. Sometimes your decision space, your options are quite limited. Other times they're more expansive. But it's always a choice of how you invest the most precious commodity you have, which is your time. So I just would call on all of you to really help each other, to support one another, to advocate for one another, to be that listening ear, to be that sounding board, to be that advocate, to help more and more of our women stay in the game. So thank you. And now, Heather or Jennifer, I think we can take a couple of questions.
Thank you for your talk. That was great. The chat's just been amazing as people have been thinking through kind of what's been going on out in the world, and that might have caused things to just flatten. And so I pulled out one of those questions because we don't have a whole lot of time. And this is kind of an interesting piece of this, since these DEI initiatives are kind of not working right now. They're not increasing, granted, so at least we're not going down. Are we at risk of companies not supporting DEI initiatives anymore?
So I don't think we're at risk of companies having every intention of supporting DEI. What I think all of us are struggling with is what are the most effective tools, what is most meaningful and helpful to keep our women in the workforce, to have a more equitable playing field for women, and particularly in women in technology. And I think this is why it is so important to share very openly, very transparently, our data, our techniques, what's working, what's not, and to align not just at a company level, but at an industry level to drive our initiatives forward. We have learned a lot in this past year. And one of the things is around this flexibility of working remotely versus working on site. As I shared, my career kind of flatlined for 10 years because I wouldn't, because I chose my family and the structure that made it possible for me to work over, moving and then causing just, a lot of stress on us as a family. But now with the, during COVID, we realized, well, gosh, that's silly. That's not a necessary, constraint. So I think we're all learning. And I do believe that giving voice to the challenges, the what's working, what's not, reporting data, having an ethos of accountability is critical so that we don't retrench and we don't, move backwards in terms of all of the hard work and all of the gains that we have driven in the last 10 years.
That's great. And so I have, there was one other question that came up, and I think this is going to be our last question. And this is like a personal beef of mine. I keep thinking, and some of our other attendees believe this too, would on-site daycare help? These types of initiatives, would that help keep women in their jobs?
It's interesting. We have studied that a long time. And we have not had on-site daycare at our own company, but we provide daycare support throughout this pandemic. I talked about having additional funds for elder care and child care, tutoring, and other support that many parents, working moms especially, need in the home. I don't think that there's a single answer to that. I think for some companies it's worked quite well with this idea where people come to the campus. But given that most of the work going forward is probably going to be some hybrid, right, combination. I mean, that's not true if you're in the hospitality industry, obviously, but if you're in the tech industry, if you're in software development, even hardware development, there's some combination of hybrid that will likely work. And the appeal for you to bring children to a site versus maybe just having some support to figure out your local, right, at home childcare solution, I think it'll vary. So I don't think that there's a one size fits all, but it certainly is a good option for many working parents.
Thank you for your answers, and thank you for coming here today. It's been great having you here. We are heading into a break, we ILC, so we have about a half an hour. Please go see our sponsors. If you do just one thing today, please go and thank them in the booth and visit them. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Sandra. So good to see you again.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.